Step into a world where Christmas isn't just about joy and celebration, it's a time for terror. In 11 Disturbing Christmas Horror Stories, we uncover the darkest secrets hiding behind the twinkling lights and festive cheer. These spine-chilling tales will make you question the safety of your holiday traditions. Brace yourself for a Christmas like no other, where the horrors are just beginning. Before we dive into the terror, make sure to like, subscribe, and share our video. We're a new horror channel, and if you think our stories are worth the fright, help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers by the end of January. Do you think we can do it? Your support means the world to us. Let's make it happen together. This happened to me and my friends last Christmas, and I still get chills thinking about it. So, I'm Amber, and I live in this small town called Pine Grove, Maine. You know those places where everyone knows everyone, and nothing ever happens? Well, that's what I thought too, until last Christmas break. My parents were away on a business trip, and I had the house to myself. Our place is pretty nice, 2 stories, kind of secluded, with woods behind it and this awesome deck with a hot tub. My 4 best friends, Madison, Taylor, Kayla, and Jessica, were staying over for our annual Christmas sleepover. It was snowing outside, one of those perfect Maine winter nights where everything is quiet and peaceful. We were all hyped up on holiday spirit, drinking hot chocolate with candy canes, watching Christmas horror movies, and exchanging Secret Santa gifts. Around midnight, Taylor had this brilliant idea to go in the hot tub. Come on, guys. When else can we go hot tubbing in the snow? It'll be like one of those Instagram-worthy moments. Looking back, I should have said no. But you know how it is when you're having fun with your friends and everything seems like a good idea. We all changed into our swimsuits, grabbed our phones for pictures, and ran through the snow to the hot tub. The steam was rising into the cold air, and the Christmas lights we'd put up around the deck were twinkling. It was actually pretty magical. We were all giggling and taking selfies, making funny faces, and doing those stupid poses you do when you're with your best friends. The contrast between the hot water and the freezing air made everything feel surreal. Madison was showing us these filters she'd found on Snapchat, and we were all laughing at how ridiculous we looked. That's when it happened. Jessica suddenly went quiet. Like, dead quiet. Her face just froze. At first, I thought she was doing one of her dramatic pauses. She's always been the theater kid of our group. But then I followed her gaze to the sliding glass door behind us. There was a face. Pressed right against the glass. Not like someone casually looking in, this person had their whole face smushed against the window, their nose all flattened and weird. The worst part? They were wearing this messed up Santa mask, but not like the jolly kind you see at the mall. This one was dirty and distorted, with these black empty eyes that seemed to stare right through us. We all screamed. Like, the kind of scream you hear in horror movies that you think is fake until you actually experience true terror. We scrambled out of the hot tub, not even feeling the cold anymore. Taylor slipped on the icy deck and scraped her knee pretty bad, but adrenaline is a hell of a drug. She just jumped up and kept running. We made it inside, locked every door and window, and called the cops. They came pretty quick, but whoever it was had disappeared. They found footprints in the snow leading into the woods, but they just stopped. Like this person had vanished into thin air. The creepiest part? When we looked at the pictures we'd taken that night, in the background of one of them, you can see this faint outline of that Santa mask in the window, watching us. This means they had been standing there for a while, just watching. We hadn't noticed because we were too busy having fun and taking pictures. The cops never found out who it was. They said it was probably some local teenager playing a prank, but I don't buy it. The way that mask looked, how they just disappeared into the woods, it felt wrong. Like, supernaturally wrong. We still have sleepovers, but never at my house anymore. And that hot tub. My parents had it removed in spring. Said they didn't use it enough to justify the maintenance. But we all know the real reason. Sometimes, when I'm in my room at night and it's snowing outside, I swear I can see something moving in the woods. And every Christmas, I get this anonymous card in my mailbox. No return address, no message inside. Just a picture of a Santa Claus mask. So yeah, that's my story. Let me know in the comments if anything like this has ever happened to you. And remember to check your windows before getting into a hot tub, you never know who might be watching. Today I'm finally gonna share something that happened to me and my college friends last Christmas break in White Pine Valley, Colorado. I've been getting so many DMs asking about why I suddenly stopped doing outdoor adventure videos, and well, this is why. So me and my 3 best friends, Derek, Marcus, and Jason, we were all super into making these wilderness exploration videos for our channels. You know, the usual stuff, camping, hiking, trying to catch weird sounds in the woods at night, that kind of content. We decided to do something special for Christmas break, a week-long camping trip in one of the most remote parts of Colorado we could find. Everything was going great for the first few days. We got some awesome drone footage, did some night photography, the usual content creator stuff. But on our 4th night there, things got different. We had this expensive camera equipment set up on tripods around our camp, you know, for those sweet night sky time-lapse that always get tons of views. Around midnight, we started seeing these weird lights moving between the trees. At first, we thought it was just some other hikers or maybe even some other YouTubers trying to get footage. The lights looked kind of like phone screens, but not quite right. They had this weird pulsing pattern, and the color was off, kind of like when you're editing video and mess up the color grading completely. Marcus wanted to go check it out, he thought it would make great content. But every time we tried to get closer, the lights would just disappear. Like they were playing with us or something. I was editing some footage in my tent when I started hearing these weird sounds. Not like animal sounds or anything we'd heard before in the wilderness. It was like, you know when you're rendering a video and your laptop fan starts making that weird whirring noise? Kind of like that, but deeper, and it seemed to be moving around our camp. I figured it was just one of the guys messing with our audio equipment. We had some pretty expensive mics set up for ambient sound recording. But then I heard everyone's voices by the fire, complaining about how cold it was getting. So whatever was making that sound, it wasn't them. When we woke up the next morning, guys, all our camera gear was gone. Not just moved or stolen, gone. We're talking about 3 red cameras, 4 GoPros, and all our audio equipment. But here's the really messed up part, we found all the memory cards neatly stacked in a perfect pyramid about a quarter mile from our camp. And every single one of them had been altered somehow. Like they'd been partially melted, but only in specific spots, forming these weird geometric patterns. But the absolute worst part. When we checked our backup cameras that we'd hidden in the trees, always have backup footage, am I right? We saw something that made us pack up and leave immediately. The night footage showed these shapes moving around our camp. They looked almost human, but they moved all wrong, like someone had animated them at the wrong frame rate. And they seemed really interested in our equipment, touching it with these weird appendages that gave off that same pulsing light we'd seen. We got out of there so fast we left half our camping gear behind. Nobody wanted to go back for it. The local rangers said they'd check it out, but when they got there, they didn't find anything, not our gear, not the memory cards, nothing. Look, I know how this sounds. Like it's just another fake story for views. But I swear on my entire YouTube career, this actually happened. Why do you think I haven't posted any outdoor content since then? Why do you think Derek and Marcus completely deleted their channels? Every time I edit video footage now, I get nervous. Sometimes I think I see those same weird light patterns in random frames. Sometimes my footage has glitches that I can't explain. And sometimes, late at night when I'm editing, I swear I can hear that same whirring sound. So yeah, that's why I stick to indoor vlogs now. Call me crazy if you want, but something out there in White Pine Valley was very interested in our cameras, and I don't think it was human. Whatever it was, it understood technology in a way that still gives me nightmares. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and maybe think twice before planning any winter camping trips in Colorado. Hey guys, what's up? So, I never thought I'd share this story, but after all these years, I still can't shake what happened during my babysitting gig back in Christmas 2019. I was just a college freshman trying to make some extra cash in Burlington, Vermont. Quick disclaimer, this is 100% real, and I still get chills thinking about it. So, I was watching these two girls, Madison, 8, and Ashley, 6, Thompson. Super sweet kids, lived in this massive Victorian house on the outskirts of town. You know those houses that just look haunted? Yeah, that kind. But the pay was good, and the family seemed normal enough. The weird stuff started on my third night watching them. It was December 23rd, and we just finished watching some Christmas movies. Everything was cool until bedtime. The girls were acting strange, like, really anxious. Madison grabbed my arm and wouldn't let go. "Promise us something," she whispered. Her eyes were dead serious. "Promise the white man won't watch us sleep tonight." Y'all, I literally felt my blood freeze. Ashley started crying, saying, "He stands in the corner and watches us. Every single night." I tried to play it cool, you know. Like, oh, there's no such thing as monsters. But these girls weren't having it. They made me check every corner, under the beds, in the closet. I had to say this specific promise, "I swear the white man won't watch you tonight." After they finally fell asleep, I texted their dad, Mr. Thompson. Like, "Hey, what's this about a white man?" His response, guys, his response still makes me shiver. "Oh, don't worry about that. He's been here longer than we have. Just don't acknowledge him if you see him. The girls are still getting used to him." Excuse me, what? Face screaming in fear. But it gets worse. Around 2 a.m., I was scrolling through TikTok on the living room couch when the temperature suddenly dropped. Like, I could see my breath. The Christmas tree lights started flickering, and I swear I heard footsteps upstairs. I gathered all my courage and went to check on the girls. As I reached the top of the stairs, I saw something that still haunts my nightmares. There was this tall, pale figure standing in the hallway, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned suit. But guys, it wasn't solid. I could see the wallpaper through it. It turned toward me, and its face was just wrong. Like someone had tried to draw a human face but didn't quite get it right. The eyes were too big, too dark, and it had this horrible smile that stretched way too wide. I froze. Completely froze. Then remembered Mr. Thompson's text, "Don't acknowledge him." So I just walked past it. Every cell in my body was screaming to run, but I forced myself to walk normally to the girls' room. The figure followed me with its head, like an owl, turning way further than a neck should be able to turn. The girls were sleeping peacefully, thank God. But when I turned around, IT was right there, standing in the doorway. Just watching. Not moving. Not breathing. I spent the rest of the night in their room, sitting between their beds. The figure stayed in the doorway until sunrise, just watching. When the sun came up, it was gone. The next morning, Madison asked me, "Did you see him?" When I didn't answer, she said, "It's okay. He likes you. He doesn't smile at everyone like that." I quit that job the next day. Found out later that 3 previous babysitters had quit within weeks. The house had been built in the 1880s, and apparently, every family that lived there reported seeing a mysterious, white man watching their children sleep. Some say he was a previous owner who lost his own children in a tragic Christmas Eve fire and now watches over the children in the house. Others say, well, let's just say the other theories are much darker. To this day, whenever I drive past that house at night, I never look at the second-floor windows. Because sometimes you can see him there, watching, with that terrible smile. Drop a comment if you've ever experienced something similar. Stay safe out there, fam. Tonight's story, man, I'm still shaking just thinking about it. This happened to me last Christmas in Portland, Maine, when I was staying at my Uncle Jack's Victorian mansion. You see, my Uncle Jack, everyone calls him Downtown Jack, because he owns like half the antique stores in the old port. He's always been the black sheep of the family. Super weird dude, living alone in this massive house he inherited from his dad. But here's the thing, there's this one room on the third floor that's got a reputation. They call it the Christmas guest room, and according to Jack, no one's been able to spend a full night in there since 1973. I know what you're thinking, classic haunted room story, right? That's exactly what I thought. I mean, I'm a skeptic. I run a freaking true crime podcast, for crying out loud. I deal with real horrors, not this supernatural nonsense. But guys, what I experienced in that room. So, it's December 23rd, and I'm stuck in Portland because of this massive snowstorm. Uncle Jack offers me the guest room, yeah, that guest room. He tells me only 2 people have ever made it through the night there, his dad back in the day, and this random social worker who stayed there once during a blizzard. Everyone else, they all bailed before sunrise. I'm like, whatever, Uncle Jack. I've spent nights in abandoned asylums doing podcast research. This is nothing. Boy, was I wrong. The room itself looks normal enough, old-fashioned wallpaper, antique furniture, this ancient radiator that makes weird clicking sounds. But the moment I turned off the lights, guys, the energy just changed. First, it was just the footsteps. Like, you know that distinct sound of someone walking on old hardwood floors? But here's the thing, the footsteps were coming from inside the room. I'd turn on my phone's flashlight, and nothing. Turn it off, and they'd start again. Around 2 a.m., I started seeing things. And I'm not talking about shadow people or whatever, I mean full-on apparitions. First, this old dude in what looked like a white suit and this crazy white mustache, just standing at the foot of my bed, staring. I blinked, and he was gone. Then, I see this figure in black, just, standing by the radiator. Not moving. Not breathing. Just, watching. I tried to film it, of course. But every time I hit record, my phone would just die. Fully charged 1 second, dead the next. Classic ghost stuff, right? I remembered what my Catholic grandma taught me about protection prayers. Started reciting the Lord's Prayer, and no joke, the presence would fade. But the moment I'd stop, they'd come back. Stronger. The worst part? The whispering. Like, multiple voices having conversations I couldn't quite make out. But sometimes I'd catch phrases that made perfect sense, and guys, I wish I hadn't. They kept saying things like, he's the one, and, Christmas is the perfect time, and, we've been waiting so long. Yeah, no thanks. I made it through 4 nights. 4 nights. I don't know how. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was journalistic integrity, or maybe I'm just plain stupid. But that 4th night, something different happened. Something that made me pack my bags at 3 a.m. and book a hotel room. But here's the really creepy part, last week, I got this letter from Uncle Jack. Apparently, the room has been more active than ever since I left. And he swears he can sometimes hear my voice in there, having conversations with the other entities. So yeah, that's my story. Take it or leave it. I know what I experienced, and I know I'm never setting foot in that room again. Not even for all the views in the world. And remember, maybe think twice before accepting that spare room at Christmas time. Tonight I've got a seriously messed up story to tell you. Make sure you're somewhere safe because this one's gonna keep you up at night. So there's this bridge in northern Vermont, just outside Burlington. The locals call it the Weeping Bridge. It's this old stone thing from like the 1800s that crosses over the Winooski River, deep in the woods where two smaller streams meet. Most people avoid it like the plague, especially after dark. I know what you're thinking, Jake, it's just another haunted bridge story. But trust me, this one's different. My cousin Ashley lives up there, and she told me what happened to her last Christmas Eve. I couldn't believe it at first, but, well, let me tell you what went down. It was snowing pretty heavy that night. Ashley was driving home from her late shift at the hospital, taking the back roads to avoid the holiday traffic. Her GPS kept glitching out, and somehow she ended up on this narrow forest road she'd never seen before. That's when her car started making these weird noises. Just her luck, the engine died right before the bridge. No cell service, obviously. She grabbed her flashlight from the glove compartment and decided to walk across to see if she could spot any houses nearby for help. Big mistake. The moment she stepped onto that bridge, the temperature dropped like crazy. I'm talking instant frost on her eyelashes, kind of cold. She said she could see her breath forming these weird shapes in the beam of her flashlight. But that wasn't even the creepy part. Halfway across, she heard what sounded like crying. Not just regular crying, this was like raw pain. It seemed to be coming from below the bridge, echoing off the water. Then she heard whispers. Old voices speaking in what sounded like different languages, all mixed together. Ashley said she felt something grab her ankle. When she looked down, there was nothing there, but she could feel fingers, ice-cold fingers, trying to pull her toward the edge. She tried to run, but it was like moving through molasses. The whispers got louder, turning into screams. That's when she saw them, shadows moving in the darkness. Not regular shadows. These things had formed, like soldiers from different time periods. They were reaching for her, their faces, she said their faces were twisted in agony. Local history says there were two major battles at that bridge. One during the Revolutionary War, and another in World War II when some Nazi spies tried to sneak into Canada. Both times, the water ran red. They say the souls of those who died there never left. Ashley only made it because she had her grandmother's heavy silver cross necklace on her. The moment she grabbed it, the shadows backed off just enough for her to sprint to the other side. She found out later that locals never cross that bridge without carrying something metal or heavy. They say it keeps the spirits from dragging you over the edge. Here's the really messed up part, when they found her car the next morning, there were handprints all over the windows. Not regular handprints either. These were like, burned into the glass somehow. And written in the frost was a message, "Join us under the ice." The weird thing is, every Christmas Eve since then, someone reports hearing screams from that bridge. Some say it's the soldiers still fighting their battles. Others think it's the souls of people who've been dragged into the river over the years. Ashley won't go near that place anymore. She says sometimes, late at night, she still hears those whispers in her dreams, calling her back to the bridge. The local police get calls about it all the time, but they never find anything. Just cold spots and that feeling of being watched. So if you're ever driving through northern Vermont during Christmas, and your GPS starts acting weird near the Winooski River, just turn around. Some bridges are better left uncrossed, especially on Christmas Eve, and the veil between worlds is thin, and the dead are looking for company. Hey guys, what's up? Today I've got a totally insane story to share with you all, something that happened to me and my wife Ashley just last Christmas in Burlington, Vermont. I know this sounds crazy, but I swear every word is true. So, me and Ashley, were both 25 and just got married last fall. We were super excited to start our lives together, you know. We found this gorgeous old Victorian house for rent in the historic district. The rent was surprisingly cheap for such a nice place, but we didn't think much of it at the time. Big mistake. The previous owner, this old lady named Mrs. Patterson, had passed away in the house about 3 months before we moved in. The realtor mentioned it super casually, like it was no big deal. Oh yeah, the previous owner passed away, but the house has been thoroughly cleaned and renovated. Whatever, right? We were just psyched to have found such a beautiful place. The weird stuff started happening on Christmas Eve. We just finished decorating our first Christmas tree together, and everything felt perfect. Our golden retriever Max was curled up by the fireplace, and we were getting ready for bed, feeling all cozy and festive. That's when Max started acting strange. It wasn't normal barking, I can't even describe the sound he was making. It was like, imagine a wolf howling but mixed with this weird crying sound. Ashley said it sounded more like a cat wailing, but worse. Way worse. Max never acts like this. He's usually the chillest dog ever. We tried to calm him down, but he just kept staring at the hallway door and making that awful sound. Then we started hearing the footsteps. Guys, I'm not talking about like, house-settling noises or whatever. These were clear as day, click, 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 footsteps walking up and down our hallway. But here's the thing, our floors are carpeted. You shouldn't be able to hear footsteps like that at all. The next night, Christmas Day, things got even worse. We just finished our holiday dinner when the dishes in our kitchen cabinet started rattling. Not like, earthquake rattling. More like someone was in there, picking up each plate and putting it back down. Clink. 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 Then the scratching started. It was coming from inside the walls, you guys. Like something was trying to claw its way out. We called our friend Father Mike, he's this young, cool priest at the local church. He came over right away, even though it was Christmas night. He did this whole blessing ceremony, burning sage and everything. We felt better and went out for a drive to calm our nerves. But when we came back, the entire house was covered in these black cobwebs. And I mean covered. Every single surface, the walls, the ceiling, our Christmas tree, everything, was draped in these thick, black strands. Remember, we'd only been gone for like an hour, and the house had just been cleaned for the blessing. Our neighbor, this old guy named Jack who's lived on the street forever, came over when he saw us freaking out on the front lawn. He took one look at those black cobwebs and went pale. Said he'd never seen anything like it in his 40 years living there. But then he told us something that made my blood run cold. Apparently, Mrs. Patterson wasn't just any old lady. She never celebrated any holidays, not even Christmas. People would see her walking around her garden at night, mumbling to herself. And get this, the day she died, all the streetlights on our block went out at exactly midnight. Father Mike later told us that while he was blessing the house, he felt something off. He said sometimes spirits can get trapped between worlds, especially if they have unfinished business. But he also warned us that not all spirits are lost souls, some are something much darker. We moved out the next day. Left most of our stuff behind. Currently crashing at my parents' place while we figure out our next move. The rental company tried to charge us for breaking the lease, but after Father Mike wrote them a letter explaining what happened, they let us out of it. Here's the creepiest part though, last week, I drove by the house. There's a "for rent" sign in the front yard again. The rent's even cheaper now. Sometimes I wonder if Mrs. Patterson is still there, waiting for the next couple to move in. So yeah, guys, that's my story. Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced anything similar. It started on a cold Christmas Eve in 1953. Bladensboro, North Carolina, was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, quiet, tucked away from the world, surrounded by dense, shadowy woods. The holiday season had cast a warm glow over the town, with lights twinkling in windows and the scent of pine in the air. But what should have been a peaceful night turned into something far darker. I was just a kid back then, no older than 12. My dad, Thomas Hayes, owned a small farm on the outskirts of town. We had a couple of cows, a few chickens, and our dog, Rex. Rex was a loyal German shepherd, always by my side, always protecting us. That Christmas Eve, as snow lightly dusted the ground, something happened that changed everything. I remember hearing it first, a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the walls of our house. It was around midnight, and I had been lying awake, too excited to sleep, thinking about the presents under the tree. Rex, who usually slept at the foot of my bed, bolted upright, ears perked, growling low in his throat. My dad came rushing into my room, shotgun in hand. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice sharp. I wanted to protest, but the look in his eyes stopped me cold. I followed him to the window instead, peering out into the snowy darkness of the farm. The moonlight barely illuminated the yard, but I could make out a shadow moving, something big, sleek, and unnervingly fast. Then, we heard it, a sharp yelp from Rex. My dad flung the door open, and we ran outside. What we saw will haunt me forever. Rex was being dragged across the yard by something, a creature unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was huge, feline-like, but its eyes glowed a deep crimson in the moonlight, and its movements were eerily smooth. My dad fired a shot, and the creature released Rex, disappearing into the woods with an almost supernatural speed. We rushed to Rex, but it was too late. He was still, his body completely drained of blood. My dad's face turned pale as he cradled Rex in his arms. I had never seen him cry before, but that night, tears streamed down his face. "It's not natural," he whispered. "Whatever that thing is, it's evil." The next morning, word spread fast. We weren't the only ones who had lost a pet. The Johnsons found their 2 hounds in the same state as Rex, and the Parkers' barn cat had vanished without a trace. Fear gripped Bladensboro, and by Christmas morning, the town was buzzing with whispers about the beast of Bladensboro. Hunters came from all over, armed to the teeth, eager to claim the glory of killing the mysterious creature. They scoured the woods day and night, but the beast remained elusive. Each morning brought more stories, livestock slaughtered, pets missing, and the occasional glimpse of those glowing red eyes. One night, a group of hunters claimed they had cornered it near the old Miller Creek. They returned with a large, black panther-like animal, its lifeless body paraded through the town square. The mayor declared the beast dead, and for a moment, the town breathed a sigh of relief. But deep down, I knew they had the wrong creature. That thing they shot. It didn't have the same eyes. And sure enough, a few nights later, the killings began again. This time, it was worse. The creature seemed bolder, venturing closer to homes, its growls echoing through the streets at night. Bladensboro was no longer just scared, it was panicked. The terror reached its peak one evening when Mrs. Harper, an elderly widow who lived alone, disappeared. Her house was found in shambles, the door ripped off its hinges, and blood smeared across the floor. But there was no body, just claw marks leading out into the woods. To this day, I can't explain what happened in Bladensboro. The attacks eventually stopped, just as suddenly as they had begun, leaving behind a shaken, hollowed-out town. Some say the creature moved on, others believe it was never real to begin with, just the product of mass hysteria. But I know what I saw. Years later, Bladensboro started hosting an annual festival in honor of the legend, turning the tragedy into a tourist attraction. People laugh and tell ghost stories about the beast of Bladensboro, but for those of us who were there, it's no laughing matter. Every so often, someone claims to see those red eyes in the woods, glowing like embers in the dark. And when they do, I can't help but wonder, is it still out there, waiting? Or worse, is it watching? Christmas was supposed to be a time of warmth and joy, but that year, it brought something else, something far darker. My name is Jake, and this is the story of the Christmas I'll never forget. It all started in a small, snow-covered town nestled deep in the heart of Tennessee, where whispers of an ancient urban legend began to resurface. Growing up, we'd all heard tales of the Vampus cat, a terrifying creature that prowled the outskirts of town. The old-timers claimed it was a cougar-like beast, half woman and half cat, with glowing yellow eyes that could pierce through the darkest night. It wasn't just a story for scaring kids, it was a warning. They said the Vampus cat reeked of skunk and wet dog, and wherever that smell lingered, trouble wasn't far behind. I never believed in it, not until that December. It began with the animals. Farmers reported their livestock slaughtered in the dead of night, their bodies shredded as though by claws. My friend, Eric, lost his dog, Buddy. He found the poor thing mangled near the woods, and he swore he caught a whiff of that awful smell. People whispered that the Vampus cat had returned, but most of us dismissed it as wild animal attacks. That is, until Christmas Eve. That night, my sister, Megan, and I were decorating the tree while our parents were at a holiday party. Snow fell steadily outside, blanketing the world in an eerie silence. The house felt cozy, with the scent of pine and gingerbread filling the air. Then, we heard it, a low, guttural growl from outside the living room window. Megan froze, her hand halfway to the tree with an ornament. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. Slowly, I moved to the window and peered out. The yard was empty, just an expanse of white snow reflecting the glow of Christmas lights. But then I saw them, tracks. They were massive, feline-like prints leading from the woods straight to our porch. "Stay here," I told Megan, grabbing the baseball bat I kept by the door. My heart pounded as I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my face. The tracks were fresh, and that's when I smelled it. The stench was overwhelming, like a mix of rotting garbage and wet fur. I gagged, my breath fogging in the icy air. Something moved in the shadows near the edge of the woods. I squinted, trying to make it out. That's when I saw her, the Vampus cat. She stood on two legs, her body covered in matted fur, her face a grotesque blend of human and feline features. Her eyes glowed like twin lanterns, and her claws gleamed in the moonlight. I stumbled back, dropping the bat. She let out a blood-curdling screech that echoed through the night. Behind me, Megan screamed, and I turned to see her standing in the doorway, frozen in fear. The creature lunged toward her, moving with an unnatural speed. "Get inside!" I yelled, grabbing Megan and slamming the door shut just as the Vampus cat reached the porch. The wood splintered under her claws as she raked them across the door, and her growls shook the walls. We bolted upstairs, locking ourselves in the bathroom. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, but the line was dead. The creature's growls grew louder, and then we heard the sound of glass shattering. She was inside. "What do we do?" Megan whispered, tears streaming down her face. I didn't have an answer. The only thing I could think of was the hunting tool Dad kept in his closet. "Stay here," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Creeping into the hallway, I moved as quietly as I could. The house was dark, the power out. I could hear her, the heavy thud of her footsteps, the sniffing as she searched for us. The stench was unbearable now, making it hard to breathe. I reached the bedroom and found the hunting tool, loading it with shaking hands. Just as I turned to leave, she appeared in the doorway, her glowing eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, we both froze. Then she charged. I fired, the loud noise echoing through the house. She screeched, staggering back, but it wasn't enough to stop her. I fired again and again until the room was filled with smoke and the smell of smoke from the tool. When the noise finally stopped, she was gone. The police arrived hours later, finding the house in shambles but no sign of the vampus cat. They chalked it up to a wild animal attack, but I knew the truth. Megan and I never spoke about that night again, but every Christmas, I catch myself glancing at the woods, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back at me. So if you ever find yourself in Tennessee during the holidays and catch a whiff of something foul, be careful. Because the vampus cat is out there, and she's always hungry. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I stepped onto the desolate street, the faint glow of Christmas lights flickering in the distance. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, always felt eerily quiet during the holidays, as if the town itself remembered. My name is Michael Carter, and this is a story I never planned to share. It happened when I was younger, one cold December night, and it still haunts me. I was home from college, spending Christmas with my family. The town was buzzing with its usual holiday cheer, tree lightings, carolers, and the occasional sight of kids dragging sleds down the street. But beneath the festivities, there was a shadow. Whispers about the Mothman had started again. My friends and I laughed it off, dismissing the stories as just another urban legend. We were wrong. It began with a dare. Michael, if you're not scared, why don't we go to the TNT area tonight? Sarah teased, her voice laced with mock bravery. The TNT area was an old munitions site just outside of town, abandoned and overgrown, where most of the Mothman sightings had been reported. The place gave everyone the creeps, but none of us wanted to admit it. Fine, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Let's go. We piled into Jake's rusty pickup truck, the heater struggling to keep up with the freezing night. The drive was short but tense, the cheerful Christmas tunes on the radio feeling out of place. As we approached the TNT area, the festive lights of the town faded, replaced by a dense, oppressive darkness. The old concrete domes loomed ahead, their silhouettes barely visible against the starless sky. You sure about this? Jake asked, his voice wavering. None of us answered. We stepped out into the cold, our breath visible in the icy air. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. Flashlights in hand, we ventured deeper into the site, the beams cutting through the darkness but offering little comfort. Did you hear that? Sarah whispered, stopping abruptly. We froze, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing, just the sound of our breathing. Then, faintly, a low, rhythmic sound, a whooshing noise, like the flap of enormous wings. It's probably just an owl, I said, though my voice betrayed my doubt. We pressed on, the sound growing louder, closer. The air felt heavier, charged with an unexplainable energy. And then we saw it. Standing atop one of the concrete domes was a figure. It was massive, easily over 10 feet tall, with wings that seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. Its eyes glowed a fiery red, piercing through the darkness and locking onto us. Time seemed to stand still as we stared, paralyzed by fear. Run! Jake shouted, breaking the spell. We turned and bolted, the sound of those massive wings echoing behind us. I dared to glance back and saw it take flight, gliding effortlessly through the air, its eyes still fixed on us. We reached the truck, fumbling with the doors in our panic. Jake floored the gas pedal, the tires spinning briefly before catching traction. As we sped away, the creature followed, its shadow passing over us like a dark omen. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it veered off, disappearing into the night. None of us spoke on the drive back. The festive lights of the town felt like a cruel joke, their warmth and cheer mocking the terror we'd just experienced. When we finally reached my house, I collapsed onto the couch, my mind racing. What had we seen? Could it really have been the Mothman? The next morning, news broke about the Silver Bridge. It had collapsed during rush hour, plunging cars and people into the icy waters below. 46 lives were lost. The official report blamed structural failure, but in my heart, I knew better. The Mothman had been there. We had seen it. Even now, years later, I can't shake the memory. Every Christmas, as the snow falls and the lights twinkle, I think of that night. The Mothman isn't just a legend. It's a warning, a harbinger of something we may never fully understand. And if you ever find yourself in Point Pleasant, tread carefully. Some stories aren't meant to be dismissed. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember this: the world is full of mysteries, and not all of them are harmless. Sweet dreams, if you can. As a kid, I shared a room with my younger brother, Ethan. It was a cozy little room tucked in the back of our house, filled with mismatched furniture and glowing string lights we had put up to make it feel more festive for Christmas. That year, the snow had piled up so high outside that it muffled all the sounds of the world, leaving only the creaks of the old house and the occasional gust of wind to break the silence. It must have been well past midnight when I stirred in my sleep. A faint tickling sensation brushed against the soles of my feet, exposed at the end of the blanket. Groggy and irritated, I mumbled, "Ethan, knock it off." The tickling stopped, and I rolled over, eager to drift back into my dreams. Moments later, the sensation returned, this time firmer, more deliberate. My irritation flared, and I snapped, "Ethan, stop it, or you're gonna regret it." My voice cut through the stillness of the room, harsh and loud. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable creak of the bedroom door opening. My heart froze as Ethan's voice called out from the doorway, groggy and confused. "Why are you yelling? What's your problem?" I sat up so quickly that my head spun. My brother was standing there in his Christmas pajamas, rubbing his eyes. He'd been in the hallway, not in the room with me. A chill ran down my spine, sharper than the icy draft that sneaked in through the old windows. I stared at him, then at the bed, then at the space under it, where shadows pooled like ink. Were you just here?" I stammered, though I already knew the answer. Ethan shook his head, clearly annoyed. "No. I was getting water. Go to sleep." He turned and padded back toward the kitchen, leaving the door slightly ajar. The room felt heavier after he left, the kind of weight that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I stayed perfectly still, ears straining for any sound beyond the faint hum of the heater and the distant ticking of the living room clock. But the silence was oppressive, and the shadows seemed to creep closer, emboldened by the flickering of the string lights. Unable to shake the unease, I decided to turn on the bedside lamp. The warm glow should have been comforting, but instead, it seemed to deepen the contrast between the light and the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, a trick of my half-asleep brain. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. The blanket at the foot of my bed shifted, just slightly, as if something underneath it had moved. My breath hitched, and my hands clenched the edge of the mattress. "Ethan?" I whispered, though I knew he wasn't there. No answer. The blanket twitched again. I couldn't bring myself to move, paralyzed by a cold, primal fear. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I stayed frozen, staring at that blanket as if my life depended on it. Slowly, ever so slowly, the fabric lifted, revealing nothing. Just the empty space under the bed. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. A soft, almost imperceptible giggle drifted through the room, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was light and childlike, but there was something off about it, something that made my skin crawl. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The giggle faded, replaced by silence so thick it felt alive. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, desperate for some source of comfort. The screen lit up, illuminating the room for a brief moment. Nothing. No one. I forced myself to lie back down, pulling the blanket up to my chin. Sleep was impossible, but I squeezed my eyes shut anyway, praying for the night to end. Minutes felt like hours, and the darkness seemed to stretch on forever. The faint glow of dawn was the only thing that finally eased the suffocating tension. When Ethan woke up, I told him what had happened. He laughed it off, calling me paranoid, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. That day, I avoided the room as much as I could, staying close to my family in the warm, bustling living room. But as night fell, the fear crept back in. Even now, years later, I can't explain what happened that night. I don't know what tickled my feet, what giggled in the darkness, or why the room felt so impossibly heavy. But every Christmas, when the snow piles up and the world goes quiet, I find myself thinking about it, wondering if it's still there, waiting for someone else to share its little game. It was Christmas Eve, and my daughter, Mia, and I were driving home from visiting my mom. The roads were icy, the kind that make you grip the steering wheel so tight your knuckles turn white. Mia was in the back seat, humming along to some Christmas carol on the radio. She's only 8, and her voice is sweet, like she doesn't have a care in the world. I wish I could say the same. The crash came out of nowhere. A fire truck, speeding through an intersection, didn't see us. The sound of metal crunching and glass shattering was deafening. Everything went black for a second. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't move. The car was completely totaled. My husband, Tom, was slumped over in the passenger seat, and I just knew. I knew he was gone. I started screaming for Mia, but I couldn't see her. The back seat was crumpled in, and it was so dark. Paramedics swarmed the scene, pulling me out of the wreckage. I kept shouting, "My daughter! Where's Mia?" They looked at me like I was crazy. One of them said, "Ma'am, there's no one else in the car." I lost it. I knew she was in there. I saw her shoe on the floorboard as they dragged me away. It took them almost an hour to find her. Her tiny body was wedged under the collapsed seat. When they pulled her out, she wasn't breathing. I thought I was going to lose her too. The paramedics worked on her for what felt like forever. She flatlined twice on the way to the hospital. But somehow, they brought her back. When I finally got to see her, she was hooked up to every machine you can imagine. Tubes everywhere. She looked so small, so fragile. I couldn't stop crying. The doctors said she was in a coma and that we'd just have to wait and see. I stayed by her side, holding her hand, whispering to her to come back to me. I didn't sleep for days. And then, out of nowhere, she woke up. Just like that. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me like she'd been gone for years. I hugged her so tight, I was afraid I'd hurt her. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Mom, I saw Dad." I froze. She couldn't have known. I hadn't told her. How could I? She'd been unconscious the whole time. "What do you mean, baby?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saw Dad. He was with a man I didn't know. They were smiling at me," she said. Her little voice was so calm, like she was telling me about a dream. "And there was a little boy too. He said he was my brother." My heart stopped. A brother? I'd never told Mia about the baby I lost years ago. How could she know? What did he look like? I whispered. She smiled faintly. He looked like me, but a little older. He said he's been waiting to meet me. I couldn't breathe. Tears streamed down my face, but Mia just kept talking. "Dad said he's okay, Mom. He said not to be sad. And the boys said he'll be with us at Christmas, even if we can't see him." I didn't know what to say. I just held her close, my mind racing. Was it the coma? A dream? Or was there something else, something I couldn't explain? That night, when we finally got home, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the Christmas tree. The lights twinkled softly, but the house felt different. Empty. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow. Small, like a child. It darted past the hallway. I told myself I was imagining things, but then Mia called out from her room. "Mom, he's here." My blood turned to ice. I ran to her room, but it was empty. She was sitting up in bed, smiling. "He said he's happy we're together," she said. "And Dad's watching us too." I didn't sleep at all that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. And honestly, I'm not sure we ever will be again.